Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Tuesdays at 8, our weekly Facebook Live event. And this evening, you are going to be watching a recorded Tuesdays at 8 session with Katie and Christel. And we're going to be talking about the New Borders Visual Faith in Puerto Rico. So welcome. We're so happy to have both of you here. So I'm going to do something slightly different. Usually I introduce people, but because they have a special connection, I am going to let them introduce each other. So Katie, can you introduce Christel for us?
Sure. This is my sister-in-law, Christel. My younger brother, James, her husband, they're missionaries together in Latin America. They have been for the last 12 years, and they're in Puerto Rico now for the last 2 years. I met Christel first at college before she knew my brother, I think. We had some business classes together, and we were in the art studio a little bit here and there. So it was a lot of fun. Now it's exciting to see what they're doing in Puerto Rico and to be able to be part of it.
Yeah, it's really sweet. Plus, being a missionary, you're in the right place. Everybody wants to have a family member that's a missionary in Puerto Rico.
Yes.
So, Christel, tell us about Katie.
Yeah, well, as Katie mentioned, we're sister-in-laws, and over the last several years, we've been able to work together on a lot of different visual faith things. Katie's helped us out a ton in a lot of different areas with missionary care, with ministry outreach, different materials, and so we've had it's been a lot of fun. It's been a neat part of our relationship and service to the church. So.
Oh, wonderful. This is going to be a fun conversation. I'm just going to let all of you, my watchers, know because some really fun things you're going to learn about Puerto Rico. So before we begin our actual discussion, Katie, do you want to open us in prayer?
Sure. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the opportunity to express our faith, to learn more about you, our Creator, through art and through our time together. Thank you for the ability that you have given us to have busy hands and open hearts at the same time. Please continue to work amazing things in the ministry in Puerto Rico and bless our conversation this evening. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much. Well, let's start with Christel, maybe you can share with us. So in 2020 was the earthquake in Puerto Rico. So maybe share a little bit about how that's affected your ministry and your presence in Puerto Rico.
Yeah, absolutely. So in January 2020, the south part of the island received a couple of major earthquakes that really caused a lot of damage that people are still suffering with houses and buildings and things. Our church was not exempt from that. We had some repair that we needed to do on our church here. But it also opened up a lot of doors. People here were recovering still from Hurricane Maria, that I think everyone remembers.
Yes.
Very well. And so it was another major disaster that came this way, but as always, the Lord opens up doors with that to share the gospel. And so visual faith became a big part of that.
Oh, wonderful. So then COVID hit. How has COVID affected life in Puerto Rico? And we forgot to say, you're actually in the southern part of the island in Ponce, correct?
Yes.
So, she's not up in San Juan where all the tourists go. She's in the beautiful part of Puerto Rico. I've been there. It is beautiful. So tell us about how COVID has affected your ministry.
Yeah, so we went right kind of into earthquake recovery with a lot of people. We did a lot of work in the refugee camps, which I think we'll talk about in a little bit. But from there, things shut down just like in the States, and everything went online. And so we were very thankful to have that opportunity to be online. But the ministry didn't stop, and so it just looked a little bit different. And we had a lot of classes that we were able to offer online as well. We have U.S. mail here, so we were able to mail out a lot of things and keep things going, which I think we'll share about later. But really awesome opportunities that the Lord gave us to do that.
So can you tell us a little bit about your the spiritual setting of what you're working in? We talked about that a little bit. You're not like a church that you were brought to that had been there for 20 years and so had a huge congregation. Share a little bit about that story.
Oh, sorry, I think I said Katie. So the congregation here that we're here in Ponce is about 3 years old, going on 4 years old. And so the people that are members here of the congregation or even less than that, as the church started before that. So it's really a lot of learning and teaching, and people are growing in their faith, but on a very new level. And so we have some people who are new Christians. We have some people who have been a part of other congregations and hadn't been to church a long time. So it's a lot of teaching. And so with visual faith, we've been able to, kind of before all these disasters kind of took place, we were using that as a tool in order for people to see the art, to read the words, to hear it, to kind of ingest it that way. Also as a therapy for a lot of people. A lot of people have gone through really hard times here, and it's become a way of kind of therapy within that, and providing that in the church. And so having those tools kind of in place, and then when these disasters happened, it was even more so.
Wonderful. So Katie, we don't want to leave you out. So how do you play into this story? Tell us about your most recent adventure.
Well, it's been exciting the last several years to be able to support James and Christel's ministry with little bits of illustration here and there. It's always fun to be involved. But then it was really exciting. The last couple of years, we've been planning to visit them over spring break and take the whole family down and spend a week. And then, I don't know, earthquake and then COVID. It finally happened this spring. So we were all very excited. It was a beautiful vacation. But while we were there, I was able to lead a watercolor class at the church. And Christel advertised it online on Facebook, and we didn't know who was going to come. But we ended up having 8 ladies, and most of them, I don't remember the number you said earlier, Christel, most of them had no association with the church yet whatsoever. But it was a beautiful day. We played with some color, and we had an opportunity to build some relationship.
Ooh, sounds like fun. Well, how about if we look at a couple of pictures about the watercolor, because I want to hear about that. So this was the class. So it looks like you prepared a handout. Can you tell us what you were teaching them about in watercolors?
Yeah. My favorite thing about watercolor is letting it do its thing, where you just add color and water and kind of let it explore on the paper by itself. But I know from experience that can go well, or it can go really badly. And so I wanted to give them tools so that they could experience this relaxation in watercolor without the stress. So we talked a lot about how you can contain the watercolor with dry paper. We talked a little bit about color theory, which colors are going to blend and play nicely and which are not necessarily going to play nicely. So we talked about that. And then you can see one of the ladies here is working on a landscape. Puerto Rico has just tons and tons and tons of beautiful mountains. So it was a really great example. They've all driven around in the mountains too. We could talk about what perspective looks like and how the mountains that are farthest back are lightest because there's just more atmosphere. So they could practice with controlling the watercolor and building up that landscape with some depth. It was a lot of fun.
Okay, so here's some more photos.
Mm-hmm. One interesting thing as an instructor was this was a lot different, a lot more different than I expected it to be. I don't speak Spanish. Most of these ladies spoke a tiny bit of English, some more than others. And so instead of it being sort of a teacher in the front instructing the people, I ended up having to be a little bit more flexible and kind of taught little mini groups at each table. I was glad that it was casual and outdoors. We had a lot of fun. It worked really well this way, but it was different than a normal class that I would teach because I had to work individually with the language barrier. It was different from one person to the next, but it was good. Everybody enjoyed things in their own way. You'll see not everyone followed along with the lesson, which was fine. The girl in the middle here was super fascinated about dinosaurs, and she told me all about them. It was kind of random, but it was about building relationship, and that was we did that, and everybody enjoyed their watercolor time.
Well, I like what you said about, so you advertise this as a art class, is that correct?
Correct. Yep.
So you use digital, so you advertise it on Facebook, and how else did you advertise this to get the word out?
Yeah, a lot of it honestly was just Facebook, and then obviously in our congregation, sharing that for people to share with their friends. We printed off flyers, but Facebook has been a huge tool for us over the course of this last year. It had been before, but even more so now, because it reaches so many people, and a lot of people here still use it in Puerto Rico. So yeah, we had a lot of people we didn't know, some people that were involved in our other online events that we met for the first time in person, and then a couple people that, we are coming to our events, kind of coming in. They're not members. So it's been an awesome opportunity for us to kind of meet people. We're in a process now of gathering people in person, which I'm sure a lot of you out there are working on as well. That transition of people being in their houses to then being okay to come out and be in community.
Right.
That's been something we focused on even before the pandemic, because a lot of people are isolated. And so bringing events like this in the church to bring people together has been a big focus, and even more so now.
Well, and I want to talk a little bit about, you've kind of touched on a lot of visual faith in-person meetings, gatherings in the United States are based in a church type setting. And you're saying you're a young church, you're advertising, and you were actually advertising an art class. So tell us about how that works and how that's, both of you can talk about that, like how is that different than the United States and the effect?
Yeah, so for us, a lot of it, in Puerto Rico, people love art and they're very artistic, and especially in Ponce. So art, crafts, things to do with make with your hands is very popular, and people love to do it as a pastime. So it's a natural thing to do as a church. And so we've used that a lot in outreach activities. So starting with COVID, we had a missionary here, Ruth Maita, and I did a once a week online art class on Facebook.
Oh, okay.
We gradually moved that to offering a mailing piece with that, in which a lot of congregations helped out put together kits for us to mail out to people who registered, which allowed for continued relationship building. And through that, we've had a lot of people who have connected with us. One of those women is now in confirmation class and a discipleship class in our congregation to become a member. And another lady who's been part of that since the beginning, so over a year now, right? Just came to church for the first time in person this last Sunday.
Hey.
And so, yeah, it's been an awesome opportunity as an outreach for people to get to know us in a very casual setting. We're very open about who we are. It's not a secret. And oftentimes we're using visual faith materials. So it's been more of an outreach opportunity, I think, than maybe, I don't know how, Katie, you have used your workshops and things back in the States.
I think because there's already the audience, I guess, of the congregation, we did some workshops that were specifically art classes, but I think people were maybe more intimidated by some of those things, whereas when we're just talking about, we're doing a visual prayer, we already know a little bit about prayer, we already know a little bit about coloring, we're just going to work on this thing together. It's still about building relationships, I think, above anything else, and just encouraging people in their own personal devotional life. But I think it is a little bit different because we're already having access to a faith-based community. So it's a little bit more of a part up front. I don't think one is better or worse than the other. It's just an interesting way of using both, because they marry so well together.
Yeah.
We can encourage people to grow in their faith who already have a faith, and people who are not even noticing what they're missing yet, to draw them in and introduce them and introduce them to Jesus and build relationship with them one-on-one and with each other in the group setting.
Thanks for explaining that, because I really wanted people to understand when we talk about the new borders quote, in Puerto Rico, it is coming at it from a very different place than most of the visual faith communities here in the United States. As Katie said, you've already got a church, got a group of people. You're just saying, hey, let me teach you some fun things to do while you're praying, versus it sounds like when you're in Ponce in Puerto Rico, it's, hey, let's do some art. Do you want to come have some fun and do some art? And then, of course, you're just naturally sharing your faith while they're doing art. So it's a different doorway into sharing that. And that's really very fun and exciting. So let's see, you've got a couple other pictures. Let's share some of those. So this was some of your students, Katie, right?
Yes. Yeah, these were, I believe, the lady on the, I guess it'd be the same. The lady here on the left, she was the one that was a child psychologist, I believe. She came actually some distance, which was kind of fun and surprising. And then the lady then on my right here, she's actually a professional artist, I believe.
Oh, wow.
She works in acrylic, so this is a little intimidating. I'm like, oh goodness, what am I going to teach you?
Yeah.
But she had done watercolor before. It was fun to see them each play with things in their own way.
So how did you bring in faith into this art project? I'm going to put you on the spot.
Well, I honestly didn't very much. I was focusing on the technical watercolor aspect and trying to keep everybody, I don't know, I was bouncing between tables just trying to teach stuff. But I did talk about my own journey with perfectionism and how watercolor gives us an opportunity to slow down and to just work with mistakes, and how all of those things kind of help me on a emotional level. But then because there's just the nature of you're busy, you're learning, you're talking, and then you're just doing. My brother James, he was doing something else earlier in the day at the church, and then when he was finished with that, he came and was visiting with the people as they were doing their watercolor painting, and Christel too. So there was having them there and having me teach meant that they were sitting and ready to talk when James and Christel were both able to then build relationship, and speaking Spanish made it a little easier for them to have these great conversations.
Oh, that's wonderful.
It was a nice opportunity.
Really fun. So then you talked about you were doing some online things. So this is an example of, tell us about what kind of things are you doing with these online classes that you're doing once a week?
Yeah, so we started off actually a year ago. Ruth did a similar kind of a real basic art watercolor class that we advertised online for, and then people joined it. And so we kind of went through different themes throughout our time. Some of them are more craft related throughout the year. For Lent, we used the Lutheran Hour devotional and went through that and did some visual art pieces with that and some more watercolor. But yeah, we kind of touched on different things. During COVID as well, we connected with two of our other missionary friends, one in the Dominican and one in Peru. And we alternated teaching these classes to offer online. Just tried to find things that either we could find at home, or things that were easy, accessible. In October, we did like a painting rock theme, for Reformation Sunday in October. And so kind of trying to look for different things that were already kind of happening in the calendar year that we could kind of build off on and encourage people to participate. So
do you present all of your activities in Spanish? And so it needs to be written in Spanish also?
Yes, everything's in Spanish.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, so it's a Spanish speaking audience is who we're.
Okay. So do we have enough resources for you in Spanish, or are you?
I often, Katie's helped us a lot.
The answer is no.
Yeah. Liz Warren, who also does a lot with Visual Faith, has helped us a ton. She produces a lot of pieces. I've written to Pat quite a bit and asked her can you translate this? And she's very prompt about doing that. So, yeah, we could always use more, especially gospel focused art is.
Well, if there's anything that you look at and you look at it as a resource that you would like to present, but it's not in Spanish, let me know also too, because I can go ahead and take the art that's already there and add the Spanish.
That'd be awesome. Thank you.
So I'll be happy to, and I think once we show this, I'll just put the call out. If there's any of our people who create our art for Visual Faith or have created a resource that we already have, and if you'd be interested in participating in maybe us gathering and creating a bigger resource packet, let's put it that way, for Spanish speaking people, that would be really an awesome mission. So that way I can be in Florida and I don't have to physically go there. I can just sit and make lots of fun stuff.
That'd be awesome.
That's how I can participate in your, in supporting the mission. So
that's been fun as a family member, because they've been overseas for so long and we've never really been sure how to help. You want to, because I've always wanted to help, but they're my family, and so you extra want to help. But like my mom, I don't know if she still does, but my mom does their bulletins for them, because they can send her what the readings are, and she can put the bulletins together and then email them back. So that's a way for her to be involved, even though she's miles and miles away. And for me to be involved with helping with the specific illustrations. When we were there, I got to help James paint a mural for their church. That was super fun. But there are a lot of ways of being involved, even when we can't be there. And I don't speak Spanish, but if I'm working on something, I can ask, what would this be in Spanish, and try my best to notice all of the spelling that I'm not recognizing. It's a good idea to get it proofread, I've found, before you really commit to it.
Yes.
Or to just do artwork that doesn't have words on it, because
Yeah.
then it's flexible no matter what language we're hoping to outreach with.
That's awesome. That's great. So then you talked a little about the refugee camps. I'm going to show a couple pictures. So tell us about what was going on with this and how you.
Yeah. So right after, in January 2020, there was the major earthquakes. And so a lot of people were displaced. They had to leave their homes because they weren't safe to be in because of damage. So they were put into a vocational school. The school was closed down, and then they lived there for almost 2 full months. So we were able to, we went every day, and we brought our tables and art supplies, and brought a lot of our visual faith things. Katie did a lot of different pieces for us here. Liz did as well. And we were able to provide that very quickly, right away. I think there's another piece here. And I think the final picture is right after, just hours after the earthquake. Because we kind of had it all ready, we had some items ready. Yeah, right here. They were still in the parking lot before they were placed into the school. It was kind of a reminder of having all these things together and having the flexibility to go out and just do it, and having things prepared ahead of time. And so you can see some of the prayer cards that Liz Warren had done. And from there, Katie made a lot of different pieces for us for kids to use. We took those all around, because people were not only placed in this refugee camp, but they were camping out in a lot of different places in the city because either they were afraid to go in their houses or their houses were damaged. So we were able to set up, our plastic tables, pull them out, have a devotion, prayer time, and then offer an art time, painting or coloring. And it was very therapeutic. It was a great time. Again, it's a time to sit and talk to people, learn more about their story, and non-threatening.
So are the refugee camps still around? Are people still in them?
They closed. So they were finally able to place people. They placed a lot of people in hotels after that, which lasted a very long time into COVID, which made things very complicated. But now they finally are moved out. The other lady that, there was a picture that you showed with Katie, the 2 ladies in yellow, the lady that took the art classes here. Yeah, the lady on your right. She was actually, we met her at the camp. She was displaced. Her housing unit was damaged. And so we've been able to have continue a relationship with her and get to know her and invite her to church events. And so she's been coming to church now too. So it's been a huge opportunity to reach out, and art is a major part of her life. She's a very artistic person, very creative. So
that's wonderful. So tell us a little bit more about the makeup of the people that you see that are you're trying to reach out to.
Yeah, even before all of the disasters like the earthquake and COVID, people were recovering too from Maria. A lot of people have been leaving and are still leaving Puerto Rico. And so a lot of people are alone. A lot of people, a lot of their families are not around. And so even before all of these things were happening, one of our main focuses was bringing people into community, bringing people together. And so that's been a huge, one of our big goals, and will probably always be, but one of our big focuses. And so that's been an awesome opportunity for us to use these tools. So,
and what are the major faiths that are expressed in Puerto Rico?
What was the first part? I'm sorry.
The major faiths, are there Catholic?
Yeah, very, especially in Ponce, but in Puerto Rico in general, it's Roman Catholic.
Okay.
But a lot of people are not regular attenders. There's also a lot of it's called brujeria. It's like a lot of witchcraft. It's a lot of it different, looks very different in different parts of Latin America, but it's definitely a big part of life here, even though you don't see it. People don't necessarily talk about it.
Okay.
But there's a lot of it's very spiritual. People see things in a very, very spiritual way, I guess, compared to what we would say in North America,
Okay.
how we view things in life. These are very spiritual. They're very, I don't want to say superstitious, but somewhat like that. And so you're dealing with a lot of those things mixed in together as well. So faith is easy to bring up and talk about, but that next step of what do you believe and who God is and how that all works is kind of more of those conversations.
Okay.
Happen.
Interesting. So how can the people in the United States in our visual faith community, how can we support you? Anything you can recommend that we do? Is it donations, actually sending physical items there? Is it sending, a donation in cash for you to buy supplies to use? Give us some ideas of how we could be involved in your ministry. Yeah,
a big thing, one, first is praying, which everyone here does, which is amazing. That's been a huge part of ministry. And we've seen that, the effects of that. Another big part that you mentioned earlier are the resources. So kind of a lot of what I do is I see something like I mentioned and it gets changed or adapted. But creating that, another big thing, a big piece that Liz Warren has been working on, and a couple other people that we kind of need to keep working at, were the bulletins, children's bulletins that you guys have done. And we only have 1 year lectionary, so it's a little bit easier.
Okay.
Something that, so for us in the LCMS and for here, we just have readings for 1 year and we repeat them year after year.
Okay.
Versus the ones that have been done, which is every 3 years. So we kind of started that. That's something I was thinking of right now that we can always use help on. And the resources are really big, having them in Spanish. One thing I would like to do is we have set readings every Sunday. And I'm able to find sometimes on Visual Faith an image with the verse, even if it's in English, that corresponds to the text, but not always. And so just having a coloring piece with that would be great too. So those are some things.
Yeah, we have a ton of Sally Beck resources.
Yes, I love her. Yes.
Do those translate well? I mean, can you use those in your ministry, even though they're in English?
I print a lot of them out because a lot of people here do speak English, or they can understand it. I use that a lot. I use her stuff a lot.
Okay.
A lot. It was great to hear her at the interview when you guys did that. So,
okay.
But again, because it's a lectionary, not all of them coincide. So.
Correct. Okay. Well, it sounds like we need to get some organization here. Maybe this is a new fun thing that Visual Faith people can do is like, let's get behind you and, set up, here's your wish list. I would like all these things translated into Spanish. Can somebody draw me this, and then we really kind of really support you in that way because it's supporting you in Puerto Rico, but we don't know that it's not supporting other Spanish-speaking people that come on the site that they don't bother telling us, that they'd like more.
Yeah, it's definitely not just Puerto Rico. It's in the States. It'd be all of our missionaries in Latin America would be able to use the resources. So.
Okay, well, that would be okay, Katie. We're gonna have to brainstorm on this. You and I are gonna have to.
Yeah. I think one thing to point out, like as an artist, I sometimes forget, like the last couple of bulletins I put together, I realized after the fact were very word heavy. Like, oh no, I can't translate these to Spanish now without redoing the entire thing. But if you can have art where the text is a little bit off to the side, or because we can edit some of those things out and replace them with Spanish, or just take them out and they can handwrite them in Spanish. And then it's a very versatile tool. Because I know Spanish isn't the only language where people would maybe be interested in using Visual Faith tools, but because there's these Bible verses right there next to it, it's hard not to put the words on there
Right.
because they're important too. And like Christel was mentioning, having the verse on the page is that's a good focus to have.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's a balancing act, but if you were to make art for one purpose, in mind that perhaps it could be changed over to Spanish, having the words be a little bit separate from the image would be, that'd be a big step in the right direction.
Okay. Well, I know exactly what you're talking about because I create the worship into the week, the monthly little separate, not the visual church year part. I do the other graphics, and I just finished them yesterday, and it's all words. So I'm just thinking, how would I have done that? Can I actually take that and change it into Spanish? I don't know. I mean, I probably could just, do the Spanish, but then I would have to send them to somebody like you, Christel, and say, is this right? Because obviously just when you do a translation, it doesn't always mean that's the way people speak it or see it, so it can be different. But okay, well, let's just pray that we get more people put this idea on their heart that maybe we can create more, specific items for our Spanish speaking community that we're trying to reach. So, couple last comments. Normally we would be having all of the questions that all of our live people would be asking, but we're not live tonight. So I think I've asked all my questions that I wanted to ask. Any last comments that you want to make, Katie, or observations about visual faith in Puerto Rico?
I'm always excited to see that it works. I mean, art works almost all the time for people, even if they don't feel artistic. To just sit down with a colored pencil, it's just good to be here. But then, like Christel mentioned earlier, God's word goes out and it does not go out. It always accomplishes its purpose. And so it's a comforting thing to see that is continuing to happen here. And even though ministry looks different than maybe you would have hoped because of COVID and earthquakes and hurricanes and all of these things, God's will is still being done and hearts are being blessed. So that's always very encouraging. And it's fun to be a part of supporting that ministry. But it's also encouraging for me to remember here in the States too, that even though things are different, we keep on keeping on and God's word is still alive and active. And even though the way we're going to be doing ministry here in small group settings and visual faith or without, God's word is still key, and we will be able to minister to one another just differently.
Right. Good. And Christel, anything we can pray for you and your husband and your family's ministry, or any last comments you'd like to make?
Yeah, well, thank you for having us and all the opportunity, all the resources. It's a huge blessing for the ministry here, for our team, and for the congregation. Keeping the people here that are coming out of COVID, coming into our church and keeping them in prayer it's a big step to come into a community in person and kind of joining as the church is kind of rebuilding itself back up. It's a big process, as I'm sure it is for a lot of you out there. So.
Very much so. Well, great. Well, I think we're going to wrap up our time together. I've really enjoyed getting to know both of you and about your trip to Puerto Rico. As I said, I've been there. It is beautiful. And if you're friends with Katie on Facebook, you would have seen all of her great photos of her family in Puerto Rico having lots of fun. Doing all the fun events that were there too. And we're so glad you were able to go and actually do some outreach, and share that with your family is really wonderful. So I'm going to say thank you very much for being my guest tonight, when you're going to be watching this. And as always, please join us next week for our conversation for encouragement and inspiration. If you would like to ask any questions of Christel or Katie, you can do this in this post that will be in the Facebook group. Don't forget, you can just ask those questions there, and Christel is part of our group, so she would see that and hopefully get a response. And if you feel like praying for Puerto Rico, for those people, as Christel and Katie have asked us to, that'd be a wonderful thing to add to your prayer list. And if you are a Spanish-speaking person and you do art, and if you want to help us maybe translate more of our resources into Spanish for not only Christel's congregation, but any other Latin American people that we support, we would love to have you. Please just put a comment in this Facebook post also. Thank you and good evening.